Hello, my name's Larry Bowles. I live in Edmond, Oklahoma. And first I wanted to show you my two layouts. First is my N scale layout. I call it Harbor Town. I've been working on it for about 6 years. My other layout is a 4x8 HO layout I call Sioux Town. It's located in my garage and is designed as a point-to-point operation, and will put 2 operators at work in sessions. I've been model railroading for over 30 years. Some of my friends suggested that I do a little video on some of the techniques that I've found through the years that I think make for a better layout. I hope maybe you can pick up some ideas here. Next is a list of the topics that we're going to deal with today. First, let's talk a little bit about mirrors. Mirrors on layouts, it's not a new concept. They've been used very effectively for 30 years. I've seen them featured in articles. So here's some applications I used on my layout. Here you can see that I put a mirror back the end of this short tunnel. It's only about 3 inches deep, but you can tell by the mirror that it gives a great infinity look. On my N scale layout, I had a river that kind of created the fact that I had a harbor, but the river had to disappear off the layout. And you can see here that with the add addition of a mirror underneath a bridge, I kind of made that go into a infinity look, which really helped a lot. Now, just to give you an idea of how things can change with a mirror, I placed one of those small mirrors at the end of the street instead of the water tower. And you can see, I'll pull it out here. See how it helped get that infinity look. Now in this scene, I've placed a mirror underneath the bridge and at the end of my small little yard. And you can see now that it just goes back to the backdrop with a few trees to hide the endings. I want to take a minute to make it clear that this is not a Hollywood production company. I'm an 81-year-old man, and I have a phone camera, and I live in a garage with my layout in Edmond, Oklahoma. So just bear with me. Now let's talk about buried track. Buried track is very common in industrial settings. It's also used a lot on passenger stations and engine maintenance facilities. Trains and trolleys running through city streets is also a popular look. The buried track, the real key here is to snip off all the ties and I use a belt sander just to really smooth them up close to the track. Doesn't impact the track, it'll stay together. And then when you place that in a street or an industry, or in this case, let's say a grade crossing, you've got something to work with. Now, again, my favorite Hobby Lobby, they come out with a real thin strip of balsas. I think it's the thinnest you can get out of their choices. But you can cut that down with scissors and place that inside, just get the dimensions kind of where you want them to be. And you end up with a real smooth, nice thing. You shave that just a little bit to get your track through, but the track's high enough that it'll work well. Once again, we're going to be at Hobby Lobby. My head scale layout is about 6 years old, and at the time, I was just beginning to use Woodland Scenic lighting, and quite a bit of it. And I happened to notice this in the holidays section. Excuse me. And so I took one home, and here's what I learned. And when you pull out the box and you put some batteries in it, let me show you here. That's what you get. Pretty slick. This series here was 62 lights, was $8. The one that I showed you opening in the box is a littler one for 25. It's 25 lights, and it's $2.99. $3. I was working on my end scale. My end scale is 6 years old, and before I started my HO, I had learned about Woodland Scenic lights. And they are wonderful, and I own a lot of them. But I had some flats in the back of the end scale that I wanted to do something with, and here's what I did. First of all, remember the statement I made back that this is not Hollywood. But I did this as a test. This is an old piece that I did years ago, and simply drilled with a drill some holes in some windows in this backdrop. Then I came around to the back, and again, remember, this is not Hollywood. I countersunk into those holes, so to speak, enough room to do what we're going to talk about next. So what you do is you place the little LED bulbette, what I call it, down into the hole so that it protrudes, or it shines at the entrance to the hole that we made with the drill. And then you just kind of anchor it down a little bit, and then you move on to the next one. These little eyelets, the little bulbs, are about 4 inches apart. And it doesn't mean that you have to use all of them right in a row. If you don't use them, you can just paint them black or put tape over them, and they will not shine on the background. All right, now we're going to do what I like Jason Jensen trains, and he always says, I'll come back in a minute. Okay, now, as we say here in Oklahoma, this ain't going to the car show. And I didn't spend more than about 7 minutes here kind of doing what we're looking at right now. So before you get a little picky on me, hang on. It's noon and a little bright in my train room for the end scale, but I think you can see that with a little careful opening of windows, etc., you can get a pretty good look, and particularly it's a little distant look and not quite as strong as you get when you get into the woodland scenes, city scenes. Now, some of you may not be particularly overwhelmed with this idea, but trust me, it works better at night and at the back of a layout, but it gets better. One other footnote on these flats, if you've worked with Woodland Scenes, you know that they're not cheap. In this past flat that we did, we used 5 lights out of a $2.95 packet. It would have taken 20 plus a half of another one. It would have taken almost $30 for us to do those same 5 lights in Woodland Scenes. So we're getting ahead here. Then one day, I was messing around with my HO layout, and as any of you who have used Woodland Scenic stuff knows, it's great, it's expensive, and it takes some real dedication to putting it together. Little wires, got to do this, got to do that. So I have a whole city block, and I thought, well, I wonder if this would work. So here it is. This is what you can do. I just simply put this, and I'll move this camera around a little bit so you can get some ideas, but you can get a lot of light activity in a building, and you'll see that so far now we've used up another 10 or 12 lights. We still got a bunch left. And what I like about it is if you put a Woodland Scenic light in there, it's a one-trick pony. Well, you can put more, but that's really expensive. So you've got one Woodland Scenics light, or in this case, I'll show you. You can adjust. I built this little gym tree, vine carrier or whatever, but you can move these around and make the attic brighter or the basement brighter. Let's see what happens here. You see that you can alter that, or maybe let's say we want to make the downstairs brighter. You can bring some of these down. And see, you get a lot more light downstairs. So what I think is so great about them is that you can vary the look. These are some old buildings. Some of them have blinds and stuff, but regardless, you see that you can mix and match. And again, you can use some pastel colors. I use acrylics, but you can wash some of these and get a orangey look or a blue look or something to give it a little more interest. But again, when I show you what I did with mine, you're going to go, I get it. Same trick. Wrap the lights around. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lights. Put the building down over it. And I've got a lot of light in the garage, but it does a great job, again, of lighting up that building. And a secret that I threw in this one, if you remember those little square mirrors that I had when we were talking about infinity shoots, I taped one of those against the back wall of this building. And it's not very easy to tell here, but if you notice there's a certain kind of glow in the room, and that is the consequence of putting that mirror up against the back wall and letting all those bulbs reflect back into the room off of that mirror. It's a little bright in my garage, but I think you kind of get the sense. All of these buildings on this side of the street, going across to the other side of the street, and up behind to a couple buildings back up in here, which are not easy to see. But the moral of the story is that was one string of lights. Now to see it installed, you can see that that's all I've done with each building along both sides of the street. Let me clarify one thing on these lights. The one here on the right is the $2.95 25 light string. The one on the left is the size that I found they also carry, which is 60 lights, and does come with a little thing that does all kinds of things. You can make it blink, you can have it fade in and out, you can do all kinds of things, as you can see looking over here at it. But the point is that I didn't see any particular value in anything other than just there's an alternating Christmas, all kinds of things. But it's $8. But to me, it just gives you more lighting for very less money, and again, an easy way just to click the button and turn it off and on. As I referenced in some of my early comments on the budget lighting, I had become a pretty big fan of Woodland Scenics lighting system and use it pretty extensively throughout my N scale and my HO. First of all, each light that we use, and they're primarily designed to be used in buildings. They have other items like telephone poles and overhead lights and etc., but these are designed specifically to be put in buildings. And each light has to come back to a power source, which they call a light hub. So you can see here we have a light. We can turn it up a little bit. And it's controllable, which makes it a nice piece. Now the back of it comes with a little sticky tape, and the intention is that you can put this in a building, back up against a wall, along a side wall, somewhere in the interior of the building, and have it stick to the wall and secure it for use. Now, the first thing I discovered when I was trying to use these was when you put this in the building against a wall, that's the only way you're going to get light into that particular room. And if you put it on a side wall like that in a building, you've limited its lighting ability in that building. And also, when you stick these on the side of a building and you want to take the building up to do some work on it, you're kind of connected to the ground, so to speak. So what I developed was what I call the Brahms straw effect. Brahms is a place here that we eat, and they have these straws, and they happen to be a good diameter for sliding that light up into the straw and into the room. And what it does is it lets you just aim this somewhere else other than just off of a wall. So you can turn this, and it's not stuck down, but you can turn this around anywhere where you think the light will do the best, showing off through the windows, let's say kind of like that. Now in this first application, you can see it's pretty bright. Now you can dim that, but again, you see it's facing this way, and what makes this little straw thing work, and you can see by changing its direction in the building, in the room, you can direct that light away from the front and get it to light towards the back. And what I like about it is you can play with that on your building to get the right setting. And with the dimmer here, you can also kind of get the right mood. If you really want to make it a little subtler, you can do it, or you can really brighten it up. The other thing I discovered, which really works great, is that I can put a mirror, and I'm going to put a mirror in the back of this building, and I'm going to turn the light around to the back of the building aimed at this mirror that I attached to the wall. Now you can see that it produces kind of a, well, it's a reflective light going through the building and gives you a lot more of a warmth kind of coverage than it would have been just a separate bulb staring at you. And the mirror really does reflect that light and saturate the room. And I think it's one of the best uses of the light. And if you're using this in an industrial building, maybe a grain elevator or kind of a bigger industrial building, you can put the light up higher with a little taller straw. And what happens is the same thing again. You can put the mirror in that grain elevator on a wall and bounce it off there, and you get a lot more light coverage in that building than you would with just a poor little one-trick woodland scene light. And I'm telling you, you can really do some great things if you play around with this thing. Now, the standard approach for running a bunch of wiring and lighting is to drill a hole, run the light up to the building, drill the hole through the bottom of the layout and underneath the table, and string it along and take it to the light hub box wherever it may be located. And they've got extensions and that will work. However, for an 81-year-old man, I could get underneath my HO table to do that, but I'd have to have my wife call 911 to get me out from underneath the table. So it's not very feasible that I could do that, not on the scale of my layout. So what I devised was a bunch of locations that hide my wiring. None of my wiring goes underneath the layout. It's all done and kept above. And here's a good example right there. You can see all those telephone pole lights and some building lights are all there, easy to reach, easy to install. This next kind of hideout or control unit, I had a lot of lights in this area, and I needed a light hub right out there in the middle. So what did I do? I built the light hub right underneath the grain elevator. It looks a little scary in there, but all those wires go to the things that are in its neighborhood, and I can adjust the settings. Once it looks good, just put the grain elevator back on it, and we're done. Here's another site where I've wired in a bunch of stuff and hidden it underneath a building that has access to a lot of lighting and building stuff in this neighborhood. So going back to our original little neighborhood, you could build the light hub in there. You could bring in the lights. You could add telephone poles, telephone lights, all that stuff. Plug it in there and it would still be reachable and not underneath the table. Okay, let's talk about water. I'd never tried a water scene before. And while I've been raised in Iowa, I was still always fascinated with harbors, boats, and barges. So I built this waterfront scene. The first big challenge that I had was the water. I knew that I had to have the water right because it played such a key role in the look of the scene. There are lots of products and some great videos on water scenes. I built a little test bed to try some of the various products and to figure out colors and see how they would turn out. And I noticed one day in Walthers that they had some sheets of clear plastic to make water scenes. And I ordered them. Now they come in 4x8 sheets. No, they're 10x8 sheets. And I have just a little scrap left from when I did my layout, but they have kind of a smooth plastic sheet and they also have kind of a rippled plastic sheet. They come clear. And then what you do is, I did, you paint the bottom to kind of get a base color underneath. And then I went and took some acrylic colors and kind of messed around with getting some depth and a little bit of a multicolored look to the water, which turned out fine. After I glued those down onto the layout, I came back and put a layer of hodgepodge over them, which frankly I thought wouldn't work, but it did add just a little more ruffle, kind of watery look to the thing. These sheets are great. The one thing that I learned is you have to kind of make sure the seams are good and tight, and I can fix some of that coming through with some hodgepodge and a little color to kind of smooth those out. I didn't get them glued down as tight as I thought I did. I considered myself lucky to have found these clear sheets. I frankly didn't know if I had the courage to try to pour a bunch of water resin all over this canal and hope that it turned out right. And if it hadn't turned out right, I wasn't sure how I'd ever clear it up, clean it up, or try to fix it. So this is a great idea. I did this modular for an N-scale T-track club in town. I had seen this method on YouTube, and it's pretty simple. Number one, soak sheets of toilet paper in a 50-50 solution of water and white glue. Do 3 or 4 layers on the bottom, let them dry, and then do your color for the lake look. Then, after it's dried, cover with water resin from Woodland Scenics. It was no big mess, and it came out great. 6 years ago, there weren't many boats or barges for N-scale layouts. So I decided I'd have to scratch build some for my fleet. I spent some time in my recliner on YouTube learning about barges and towboats. Then I went to Hobby Lobby and I bought some balsa blocks and came home and started whittling. There's nothing very significant about these. They're easy to do, just try. You can make them empty like I did these coal ones because they look good empty, but also you can stick the coal in there and they look good too. This was probably one of my bigger challenges But if you take some styrene, corrugated styrene, and bend it over a little bottle, heat it up with your wife's hair dryer, you can get that bend to stay. And that was how I was able to form the covers on these bulk barges. The the rock barge here is really pretty simple. You just get a pretty good base, sprinkle on some rock, stick a little crane on there like I did, and you're done. All of these, you can order these little bollards from the internet and dress them up. And probably the one that I enjoyed the most was this little workboat, and you'll see those in these harbors around these sites that I visited. They use these for repairing dikes and recovering salvage, and it's just literally my own creation. Put a bunch of pieces around a caboose and some stuff in an old crane that's been around on a lot of layouts. And it's got a little tugboat that fits behind it. And it just makes a real cute look on the layout. Now my towboats, that was a little bigger challenge, and I don't want you to get discouraged here, but all I can tell you was I would look at pictures, I would come back to my bench and start trying to develop a profile. And I kind of have a rule that it may not be scale, but it looks right from a distance. We have in Oklahoma the 3-foot rule, which says that when you're building stuff and putting it on a layout, you get a little forgiveness, because most people can't get closer than about 3 foot to what you've done. So it gives you a little bit of room. But don't be discouraged. I got some thin styrene scissors and would proceed to cut out and try to build the profile, the cabin, to stick on some detail. And just for those who aren't quite sure, they refer to these as towboats. And actually what they do is push barges on rivers, whereas when you see a tugboat, that's usually the big harbors in New York, ocean-going kind of stuff with big round noses. And that's the difference between what we call a towboat on the river and a tugboat in the harbor. Last year I did find Foss models. Wood kit builders had come out with this little boat, and it's one of the first N-scale boats that really kind of fit what I was trying to do. It's really a lobster boat, but I kind of dressed it down a little bit and stick up stuff on there, and it's a workboat that goes out and handles stuff for the crews on tugboats, towboats, marinas, whatever. Now, it's a nice little wooden boat. The first time I've ever tried a wooden boat. It turned out real well. So the market's coming into this, and there's a lot of new great stuff out there. Well, there you are. I appreciate you taking time to watch my video. I hope it might give you some ideas for your own layout. Bye now.